All right, everyone, it is time for the final keynote. And I've got to say, I've been looking forward to this one all day. This is the perfect blend of two great sources of information, TED Talks and The Simpsons. Please join me in welcoming to the main stage prolific and hilarious Simpsons writer Carolyn Omine and TED Talk speaker, editor-in-chief of Stuff magazine, Toby Shapshak.
Hello and welcome to this very exciting episode of How to Write a Simpsons episode. Not really, but we are lucky enough to have the truly legendary and awesome Carolyn Omine. She has been a writer for The Simpsons. She has been a writer for a whole bunch of amazing things that you've seen in the CV, and she's now an executive producer of The Simpsons, which is clearly one of the greatest TV shows in the history of television forever. My name is Toby Shapshak. I'm a journalist based in Johannesburg. I write about technology, and I think they thought I would be funny enough to be funny with someone who is genuinely funny. Or we may just be the local color at a dinner party, Caroline. Hello, how are you?
I'm good, and I enjoy being the local color.
So my first question is, The Simpsons is just the coolest TV show ever. How wonderful to be involved and work on it. It must be like a dream to work with such creative, brilliant people.
It really, really is. And I do. I think most of the time I appreciate it. I do complain a lot sometimes, but I was a big fan of the show. I came on in the 10th season. And by the way, I just feel like I need to point out that I am a co-executive producer. I was at one point an executive producer, but whatever. No, I was a big fan of the show. I just really loved it. And so to be on it, and it's so strange now because I've been on it almost more than 20 years.
Yeah, amazing.
So I think we have a dream cast. And we've added new actors, and they're all great. And I do remember when I was pregnant, I just thought my kid is so lucky because I laugh every day, and not just at the work, but like just even the conversations that we have. Everybody is so crazy and funny, and yeah. And I remember at one point telling myself to just sort of really remember that this is what I'm going through right now are going to be my good old days. So I just wanted to be aware of it while it's happening. And I keep thinking the show was going to end. I thought when I got on in season 10, I thought, oh, good, I get to be on my favorite show in its last season or two. And I keep thinking that, but it just keeps going. So.
Listen, it has been, nearly 30 years of the most extraordinary insight and cultural reference. I mean, there's no one in the world who doesn't know who the Simpsons are. And I even have a pair of Homer Simpson slippers.
That's so great.
Which of course you put your foot in Homer's mouth, which is what Homer does all the time.
He's eating your leg.
Indeed. In fact, my 4-year-old son has stolen them and loves them. Can't say Homer yet, but thinks they're awesome. So it's a brilliant television show. But like I suppose like I've always looked at people who are brilliant at what they do, and no one ever sees the hours and hours and hours of other work that goes into it. And that's really what's quite remarkable about The Simpsons is it looks like it's just easy, but I know that the writing process for television is extremely time intensive, and the collaboration between some really brilliant minds. It must be a really interesting process to do.
Yes, it is. It does feel a lot like play. In fact, I think that when we kind of have to sort of make it that way. for the most part, we're always writing as a group. We each get, we come up with our script ideas and we pitch an idea and we'll all pitch on it. And then we'll have about 2 weeks off to write it by ourselves. And that's really the only time we're writing by ourselves. But then for the rest of the time, we bring it in and it's just everybody looking at this script. And, it's very much a process of somebody will be running the room and sort of saying, okay, let's look at this part here. And everybody just suggests, and it's just pitching jokes. And, I always tell new writers, because sometimes when you're new, you'll come in and you'll just kind of go, somebody will suggest a joke and you'll go, no, because I feel like when you're new, if you don't have jokes, you kind of want to my contribution will be to identify the bad jokes. And, it really is, even if you're running the room and when I run the room or anybody runs the room, you just kind of the jokes that aren't going to make it, you just sort of nod. Sometimes you laugh at them, but as a contributor, you realize, okay, unless somebody starts typing, unless the person running says, then just keep suggesting. And I do think that really helps keep the ideas flowing. Like if, we had one writer who sometimes he would get in a bad mood and he would be like somebody would suggest something. He'd be like, yeah, like that, but less hacky. And the room would start getting really quiet. And he would see, oh shoot, I'm so sorry.
That's okay. I recognize that wake up in the morning ringtone myself.
But
I find that environment quite intimidating, actually. My oldest friend always says I'm only funny when I'm not trying to be. And someone once called me a sit-down comedian, but he was a banker. But I'm a professional writer, and I write every day, but I write in a very different field, news journalism or feature journalism, very different to what you do. And that creative process, I suppose, is very interesting to me, even though people look at me and go, oh, look, you're a creative. I go, no, I just have creative hair. It's a profound way of getting to the nuggets, like the real gold of it. You have 100 jokes and you end up with 5 or 10. That's an incredible output from a lot of very talented people to produce something so good and consistent and watchable. I mean, I think I've watched just about every episode, if not several of them, many times. I mean, that's the hallmark for me. It never gets old.
I think when writers come to our show, if they're new and we, it might be a little bit of a culture shock at how long we'll go, how long we'll try for a joke. Because I know I've been on other shows where we had this sort of rallying cry of "it's good enough," and then we'd move on, or there's some things like it's a 2 a.m. joke, like that works because it's late. But at The Simpsons, and because of the animation process, I do think we do go over scripts a little bit more than other people do, and there is that thing. Sometimes if there's a joke that we're having a problem on, we'll send 5 writers off and they'll just go into a room and they're supposed to come back with a list, which is the hardest because usually it's a joke that we're having a problem with. And so you already know a lot of stuff has been tried. And now they tell you go off and come up with a list of alternatives. But I do think that sometimes, when you have a creative, something you need to come up with a solution for. If you tell yourself, okay, I've got to come up with 7 ideas, and you come up with 3 ideas, you're going to go, okay, that's all the ideas, but if you say, no, I've got to fill out 7, and you push, there will be things that you will be surprised at what comes up. And I think it is that little extra push to no, let's keep trying and let's see what happens. And, if you decide, oh, you know what, number 2 was actually the best,
Yes.
that happens too.
It's
but
never number 1, is it?
I remember one time somebody came back and was like, well, we've got a lot of choices here, each one better than the last. And then and the showrunner just goes, than just read the last. And like,
I love this thing you said about you laugh every day. And I think given the last year of the world and the state the world's been in, I just think, thank God we have a sense of humor, because that'll get us through things that nothing else will.
it's true. I used to do improv, and I think that's sort of where I began everything, writing, comedy, anything. And also just sort of beginning that process of like how do you find funny when when you don't feel funny. I remember there's a man named McPherson who said like creativity isn't so much a talent as a process, and that truly creative people are people who are able to put themselves in that mood. But when I used to do improv, I began to notice that when I would be sitting down watching the other people do their improv, sometimes I'd be in this mood of like, that should have started faster, and they should have gotten to I'll get very analytical and like put all the rules that I know and have learned to work as I, criticize. Yeah. And on those days, I would never be as funny as like some days I would sit and just sit back and say, okay, I'm just going to be entertained by my friends. And there is a way you sort of let yourself laugh more at everything. And when I was in those kinds of moods, when I got up, I would be funnier too. And so I sort of try to like apply that sometimes too in the room where I realize, okay, I'm just being too critical. I need to just laugh and enjoy what's happening here, and then it'll all just start to flow a little bit better.
Indeed. And I just suddenly remembered something I read a few years ago. It was about the creative process of writing The Big Bang Theory, and how all those mathematical equations on boards are actually real, but they're like maths jokes, which of course I wouldn't understand because I don't speak maths as a first language. But the impression that I got of the difference between movies and televisions is that movies are so huge budget. There's so much focus that the producer very often will run it, whereas television, it's the writers who are the stars of the show in many ways, and you see that in great comedy. The Simpsons, the writers are the stars. The movie is brilliant. The Big Bang Theory is witty and funny all the time because the writers are the stars of the show. I mean, because I'm a writer, I think that's a good thing. But I've always noticed that.
True. I think it's a more respected thing in, like, I think about England. They seem to really love the writer. I used to feel like writers in Hollywood were there used to be like this old Hollywood joke about, like, did you hear about the dumb blonde? She slept with a writer. Like,
But my wife is blonde. I'll tell you told the joke.
I know that blondes are very smart because they.
Me too. She's the smartest person I've ever met.
But yeah, I do think that compared to movies, I think television is a little bit more writer driven, and I think that does help. For a long time, it was more executive driven. I think that one of the reasons why The Simpsons came to be was because the Fox network was a fledgling network, and they wanted to attract this talent that would probably not want to go to a weblet at the time. And so they got people like Jim Brooks and Tracy Ullman by saying, okay, we're not going to give you notes and stuff. You're gonna have this freedom. And I do think that made a huge difference. And now I think with cable and stuff like that, I think that more executives are sort of stepping out of the way. And I don't know, I don't do movies that much, so I don't really know if that's still the case.
But you did star in a movie called Get a Job in 2011. And what was it like being in front of the camera for a change?
It was my dear friend Brian Cohn. It was his movie, and it was first of all, for me, I grew up in Hawaii, and it starred these people that, if you were into Hawaiian music or if you grew up in Hawaii, you would know who they were. So for me, they were giant. That I was like, oh my God, Henry Capono is playing my dad. Like, it was really amazing, and I got to kiss Uncle Willie K. It was all really great. So that was really fun. But I did find being like, I just remember the first time I saw myself on camera, because sometimes you see actors in person and you're like, oh well, they're just sort of normal looking. I guess the camera just really. And I remember looking at myself on the camera going, wait, why isn't that happening for me? I thought we're going to do the thing where I'm going to look so much better. But then people would tell me, like, they would look and they'd go, oh, wow, you look so good. And I realized, like, oh, I must think I want to look better than that. But it really made me realize why actors can be a little neurotic. Because as soon I was just cataloging all the plastic surgery I wanted to do. But that was, to me, one of the hardest parts. But other than that, it was so much fun. I don't know if all movies are that much fun to do, but this was a real labor of love. And, it was just with a lot of people that I love. And there are people who like live on Maui, like Willie Nelson. And
really? He lives there. I love Willie Nelson. I love country music. It's my terrible, deep, personal, dark secret. I like country music. I love Dolly Parton,
It should be a dark secret. I love Dolly Parton.
Exactly. But I have to go back to one sentence that almost floated by, which is you grew up in Hawaii. I mean, I think just about everyone alive wishes they said that, or anyone who watched Magnum PI as a kid,
Yeah, except for all the crime that's happening on this tiny island. But like, we have this guy in a Ferrari or something running around.
I know, lucky guy in a Ferrari. I want a benefactor like that.
It was great, and I really didn't appreciate it until I went back as an adult. But as a child, we had a real inferiority complex, I think. I sort of imagined, like, I watched TV and thought, that's the way the rest of America is, or what we would call the mainland. Like, I'd see these mothers, like, making these elaborate breakfasts, and I was like, on the mainland, they have such big breakfasts. And I was like, in Hawaii, we just eat cereal and and toast. And then, I come here, I'm like, all right, okay, so you guys are doing that too. And I realized, the teachers would tell us, like, you better get these fractions because on the mainland, they're already past it. So we were always like, oh man, the mainland.
So, I grew up in apartheid South Africa. We only got television in 1976. I remember me and my sister watching somewhere in my house is a watch with that TV, a clock with that TV pattern. And we would watch anything. And of course, all the American television was dubbed into Afrikaans, which is very much like Dutch, which we all learned to speak. So, and then Spider-Man came along, and Spider-Man was dubbed into Zulu. So instead of Spider-Man, it was Robabi, Robabi. So we have such a straight, like the Steve, the $6 Million Man. So what was his name? Steve something or other. And he was called Steve Austin. That's right. And in Afrikaans, he was called Die Man van Staal, the man of steel. So the first time I went to America, I walked around, it just seemed so familiar. It's like, I feel like I've been here because I'd watched so much of that television. So I'm glad to see other parts of the world also didn't experience the mainland like that. I mean, we've really got a time for one more question, and I suppose we're talking at a cybersecurity conference. I mean, here we are, we're in the room to lift the spirits about this terrible threat, cybersecurity. No sooner had I written about ransomware in South Africa affecting Richard Branson's Virgin active chain of gyms than the Colonial Pipeline thing happened. And I've just watched cybersecurity. I'm a technology writer, obviously. I've watched cybersecurity become the biggest thing in the world. But luckily, you and I don't have to talk about it. We're just here to remind people that Bad
I
stuff happens
know.
all the time, and the only way to survive as human beings is to laugh about it.
Yes, and to say thank you. I mean, I feel the same way about cybersecurity as I was just thinking about how grateful I am for the doctors who got this vaccine together so quickly for COVID, because I don't know what that is. I don't know how to do any of this, and I recognize the importance and the threat, but I have no idea what to do except for to change my passwords when they tell me to. But
Everything Jonathan Ryber says, just do it. I mean, I do, I mean, he's like a doctor of cybersecurity, isn't he? 7 years of studying and working. That makes you a doctor of Dr. Ryber,
yeah,
cybersecurity expert.
I think that and I imagine, I remembered, even before COVID, there was this miniseries called Pandemic, and it just showed all the doctors who were like, yeah, it's not a matter of if, but when. And they were these doctors who would sort of watch animals and see what the threats were. And I thought, wow, I'm so grateful for these people who are like losing sleep over this thing that could happen. And I imagine that with cybersecurity experts, this is sort of the same thing. So thank you, everybody watching, for being smart enough to know what's happening out there and to be working on the solutions for it. Because
indeed. And I was just about to say, laughter survives everything. And then I realized, I know South Africa, and especially Johannesburg, we call it Joburg, has a really bad reputation for crime. And a friend of mine makes these bottles that say, I hope I can see it. You probably can't read it. It says, this is tap water. It's the safest thing you can do in this city. I'll send you a picture. Drinking this water is one of the safest things to do in the city. And of course, crime's a problem. And of course, there's a virus. But actually, our survival mechanism, our escape valve, our pressure release is a good burst of laughter,
Yeah. It does. I think I can remember times laughing at funerals and things, and feeling bad, but also sort of realizing that, when you're still able to laugh, it's like, okay, well, I guess things are going on. And,
agreed. I had the same impression when my father died a few years ago. And he always used to call my mother his favorite wife, and she'd say, I'm your only wife, And at his funeral, my mother and I joked, and I said, you were our favorite father. And it's what we need. It's that escape valve. Look, I just have to thank you, Carolyn, Omni. You are just a legend of comedy and humor, and please don't stop. We need the Simpsons.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And we really appreciate how lucky we are that we have people watching our show and paying so close attention. And even when it gets sort of annoying because they're like, picking apart things, I'm just so glad that they care enough to look at it. But I do think there is that the thing when, in like the thing I said about in improv, you do have to sometimes kind of step back a little bit in order to laugh at everything. And I do think it is what we all need to do. And
I totally agree. And listen, I have to say, a shout out to my countrymen. South Africa's exported our brand of comedy through Trevor Noah. So, we've had a little bit of a role to play in the world. We don't have Nelson Mandela anymore, but we do have Trevor Noah.
Oh, yeah. The Daily Show is like the conscience of, America right now.
Great. I just have to thank you. And thank you, everybody, for watching this. We're going to put you back to the very interesting cybersecurity stuff. Yes, very important. And thank you for watching.
Thank you for your service, cybersecurity.
Thank you. Thank you for your service.
Oh man, I'm definitely going to be watching this one again. So much fun.
All right, we are winding down the event. It's been such a pleasure to host all of you. We want to extend a personal thank you to everyone that participated, the fantastic speakers, the sponsors, the customers, and the people that want to get a little more acquainted with AttackIQ. And also thank you for being a part of the very first Purple Hats conference. It's really been a pleasure for Ron and myself. Don't forget that there is a great opportunity for networking, 12:05 Pacific time today, all the way up until 12:35. Well, you'll have a chance to connect with your fellow cybersecurity practitioners and pros and other sponsors and talk about everything from ransomware to purple teaming and more. I hear there's a prize for a lucky person to win one pretty slick purple igloo cooler, and I heard those are coming back in style, so definitely check that out and you don't want to miss it.
Definitely. Thanks again, everyone. Be safe and stay well.